Okay, greetings to all of you at your various locations. And I hope that by now you are all keeping safe. So last week, we started with the issue of feasibility analysis. I'm sure by now you've watched my video. So feasibility analysis basically helps an entrepreneur or a would-be business person to ascertain whether the creative ideas they are nurturing or having are viable. In other words, whether it is worth they venturing into a business. So by this time, it is assumed that we have unequivocally ascertained the viability of your business idea, and you are now poised on to enter into full-scale business. But there is also another important analysis that we have to conduct so that you can confidently say that you now have all the requisite information at your disposal for you to make a decisive decision to venture into business. So by the end of this lecture, you should be introduced to both industry and market analysis. And one of the cardinal things you are expected to learn is the issue of industry analysis and its purpose. Again, you will also be introduced to the 5 competitive forces by Porter and how they can be used to determine an industry's profitability. Again, students will also be introduced to how entrepreneurs can learn from and apply these 5 competitive forces by Porter to successfully carve out a business model. Then students will also be introduced to the 5 primary types of industries and the opportunities that they offer. And lastly, they will be introduced to competitive analysis, its purpose, and how they can design a competitive analysis grid. Okay, so let's go straight to the point since we do not have a lot of time at our disposal at this point in time of the semester. When we talk about industry analysis, it is twofold. It's composed of the word industry and then making an analysis of this industry. So if you disaggregate industry as a word from industry analysis, what does an industry mean? Like I mentioned in my previous lecture, an industry can be basically characterized as a group of firms that are producing similar goods or services. So whenever you have a group of firms producing similar products, goods, or services, then we can say we have an industry to some extent. So typical examples could be the telecommunication industry, the music industry, the mining industry, and so on and so forth. What then do we mean by industry analysis? So in the strict sense of it, when we talk about an industry analysis, it is that we are conducting a business research that focuses on the potential of a particular industry. In other words, we are applying our research methods skills to understudy a given industry that one has an interest in venturing into, so that they will be able to say that By going into such an industry, one stands at a potential of making profits or stands at a potential of making a loss. So industry analysis is very much important for the purposes of this entrepreneurship course, and even in any sort of business that you are running, in the sense that it helps a firm to determine if the niche or the target markets it has identified during the feasibility analysis stage are accessible, and which part of the market represents the best point of entry for the new firm. In other words, during the feasibility analysis, we might have come across wealth of information which we now base our intentions on in order to enter into the business markets. And perhaps we might have come across some untapped areas in the industry where we want to carve a niche for ourselves and be notable for delivering services over there. But this industry analysis that we are going to conduct will help us to know whether we should actually go into it, because it will now draw our attention to the potential areas where we can use as our point of entry and the possibility that we stand in terms of making profits. So it's very much important that we conduct it before you actually go into it, or you decide to even redesign or remold your business idea. So still on the essence of industry analysis, it is important because once it is determined that a new venture is feasible in with regards to the industry and market in which it will compete in, a more in-depth analysis is needed to learn the ins and outs of the industry. In other words, it is okay to say that the business idea that you have is viable because of the feasibility analysis you did. In other words, you have targeted customers who will actually patronize it and they are looking forward to it. However, you still need to understand the ins and outs of the specific industry that you are entering so that you will capitalize on the aspects of the market where you have a lot of strengths, whilst you also marshal out resources that will help you to counter your weaknesses and threats in the market. So it is very much important. Again, the analysis helps a firm to determine if the target market is identified during the feasibility analysis is favorable for a new firm. Sometimes the feasibility analysis will tell you that this idea you are having is viable. However, it might not be viable for a new entrant. It might be viable for a matured industry player who already have the requisite supply chain and customer base and network in the market. So it is important you peruse all these things before you actually decide to go for it. Now, there are three key questions that entrepreneurs must answer when they are contemplating on whether to pursue the idea of starting their firm. So as a would-be entrepreneur, these are the three plausible questions that you must answer, and the outcome of the answer will also determine the essence or the degree, extent to which you must pursue your idea or not. So what is the first question? The first question is that, is the industry accessible? So you have to ask yourself as a potential entrepreneur, this industry that you are trying to enter into, is it accessible? In other words, is the industry a realistic place for new venture to enter? Now, in there, we are trying to ascertain from this question whether the industry entertains new entrants or it is the type of industry that have a lot of restriction protocols in place that cuts the throat of new entrants. So depending on your answer, if your answer is that the industry is accessible, then you stand a chance of continuing or pursuing the idea of starting the new firm. In addition to question one, you also have to ask a second question, which is, does the industry contain markets that are ripe for innovation or are underserved? In other words, is the industry that you are venturing into very much conservative, or is that industry also very much underexploited? If it is underexplored or underserved, then it means that a lot of people having entered into it, and there are so many opportunities when you go in there. But if it is overserved, then it means that unless you are coming into the industry with something which is very much different from what is currently existing, it wouldn't be prudent for you to pursue it. So if your answer to this question is yes, then it will be a viable idea for you to pursue. The third question is that, are there positions in the industry that avoid some of the negative attributes of industry as a whole? So if you take a sober look at the industry, does it consist of positions in the industries such that it avoids some of the negative attributes of an industry? If the answer is yes, then it means that pursuing this particular industry, you will not be free from some of these negative attributes. But if it is no, then it means pursuing it will be a good idea. Okay. So are there positions in the industry that avoid some of the negative attributes of industry as a whole? Now, in order to ascertain, still on the industry analysis, there is the need for you to ascertain how attractive a particular industry is. And there are several techniques that one can adopt to assess the attractiveness of an industry. In assessing industry attractiveness, two main strategies or techniques can be employed. And these are, one, by studying environmental and business trends, which I think we covered in lecture 2 or 3. And two, the 5 competitive forces by Michael Porter. So we'll be looking at them shortly, but let's take it one after the other. In terms of studying industry trends, it can be generally put under two main themes, which are environmental trends and business trends. So when we talk about the study of environmental trends, we basically refer to all the pestle factors that fall within a business environment. And these include economic trends, social trends, technological advancements, political and regulatory changes, and so on and so forth. So that if the economic health of a particular country is very, very poor in terms of high level of inflation, a lot of banks collapsing, and so on and so forth, then the potential to enter into such an industry in a particular country of this sort should be highly guided, in the sense that the chances for you to reap back your profit will be negligible. Another example is industry that sell products to seniors are benefiting by the aging of the population. So if you target to enter into a particular industry where in the interim it is highly or densely populated by senior members, then churning out goods and services that target such aged population is recommended in the sense that their services are in higher demand. And the demand for products for the aged is also on the higher side. Now, with respect to business trends, we are referring to the various types of trends that impact an industry, either directly or indirectly. An example could be the profit margins in the industry increasing or falling. So if you find yourself or you come across a lot of information on the internet that there's a higher amount of profit being read by people in a particular industry, then it sends a signal that such an industry is very much attractive and everyone would like to venture into it in order to get a share of the profit pie. The same vein, if input costs are going up or down in a particular industry, it may also influence how attractive such a sector or industry becomes to potential entrants and those that are currently operating within it. Now, so the second way of the second technique that can be used to ascertain the attractiveness of an industry is what we call the 5 competitive forces model. And you can read about it later when you Google 5 competitive forces by Michael Porter. So the 5 competitive forces was actually developed by an authority we call Porter. And it has now become notably known as Porter's 5 competitive framework. So what this framework or model does is that it provides 5 main attributes or thematic areas that can be used to assess the viability of an industry in terms of their ability to make profits. So the 5 competitive forces model is a framework for understanding the structure of an industry. And the model is composed of the forces that determines an industry's profitability. So like I mentioned earlier on, and they help to determine the average rate of return for the firm in an industry. So if you pump in X into an industry, what is the likelihood that you make profit out of this X investments? Basically, that is what the competitive 5 forces competitive framework does. It is important to add at this point that each of the 5 forces impact the average rate of return for the firm in an industry by applying pressure on industry's profitability. So a well-managed firm tries to position their firm in a way that it avoids or diminishes these forces in an attempt to beat the average rate of return in the industry. And what they are trying to say is that these 5 forces try to give you a signal that your profit is under threat or your profits will go up. And depending on how you manage these 5 forces or factors, you are likely to make profit or you are likely to have your profits diminished. So it is supposed to be an avenue for you to assess an industry you intend to enter into, so that if it is very much attractive based on the answers or responses you provide to the 5 forces, then you will be in a good position to venture into it. Now, so what are these five forces? The five forces are: one, threat of substitutes. That's the industry that you are venturing into, or that the goods and services we intend to provide into the market have a lot of substitutes already existing. Threat of new entrants is the industry that you are entering into very much welcoming to new entrants. If that is true, then it means that as and when you make profits, a lot of new entrants will be flooding into the market to get a share of the profit pie. Rivalry among existing firms. Is there a cutting through competition among rival firms? If that is so, then it will have some ripple effects on your profitization motives. Bargaining power of suppliers. Within the industry that you are entering into, suppliers play a key role. So, do they hold all the buttons at their end in terms of their power, or the power is shared between the suppliers and the industry players? Bargaining power of buyers. Buyers are basically the ones that fuel the continuity of business, because the moment they decide to stop patronizing your products, then you are out of business literally. So, are you entering into an industry, or are you trying to venture into a particular market where the customers or the buyers have a lot of power? If they command a lot of power, then it will also have ripple effect or implications on your profitization motives, because they will always be dragging you to bring the prices of your goods and services down. But they will also be expecting it at a higher quality. So let's take a look at them into details. Okay, threats of substitutes. So by threats of substitutes, we are referring to the degree to which the industry you are venturing into um, has or is flooded with a lot of substitutes for your products. Now, the price that consumers are willing to pay for a product depends in part on the availability of substitutes. So, for example, there are few, if any, substitute for prescription medicines, which is one of the reasons why the pharmaceutical industry is so profitable. Because when a doctor prescribes a particular medicine for you, the chances that you will get other substitutes for the same medication is not so high. And even sometimes, even if there are substitutes, you realize that in terms of quality, the efficacy of one drug over the other might be very high. And so that is the reason why they make a lot of profits in the pharmaceutical industry. In contrast, when close substitutes for a product exist, industry profitability is suppressed because consumers will opt out if the price gets high. This indicates that at any point in time, when you are in churning out goods and services in an industry where you have a lot of close substitutes, then the chances for you to even beat your price up will be negligible. Now, the extent to which substitutes suppress the profitability of an industry depends on the propensity for buyers to substitute between alternatives. Yes, so that was what I was explaining earlier on. And this is why firms in an industry often offer their customers amenities to reduce the likelihood that they will switch to substitute products, even in the light of price increase. So that is why oftentimes they do promotions like buy one, get one free, or buy X quantity of our product and we will give you free some of the products in addition, just to sustain their interest. Now, if the firm in an industry are highly profitable, the industry becomes a magnet to new entrants. So what we are saying is that when entrepreneurs sit behind and they scan the business environment and ascertain that a particular industry is booming in terms of the profits that is being reported or the profits that is trending in the business market, then they all feel an urge to go and get a share or a piece of the profit pie. So unless something is done to stop this, the competition in the industry will increase and average industry profit will also decline. And this is so because all the new entrants will be gradually getting a piece of the pie. And so the profit that uh, business organizations were enjoying previously will continue to reduce. So firms in an industry try to keep a number of new entrants low by erecting barriers to entry. And when we talk about a barrier to entry, it simply refers to the degree to which an entry condition is created to disincentivize new firms from entering into that particular industry. Now, so let's look at some of these barriers and how they can be used to disincentivize new entrants as a way of guaranteeing the profit motives of existing firms. So the first barrier that we are going to look at is what we call economics of scale. Economics of scale. Now, industries that are characterized by large economies of scales are difficult for new firms to enter unless they are willing to accept a cost disadvantage. And when we talk about economies of scale, it simply means that for a firm to make profits, there is a need for them to produce in large quantities. And new entrants, because their financial muscle is not that strong or their pocket is not that deep, they will not be in a position to produce in this huge or large quantities. And for that matter, economies of scale will become a barrier for them, especially when there is a need for them to produce in large quantities before they can reap or get a share of the profit pie. The second barrier to entry, which is a threat of new entrants, is product differentiation. How distinct is the good or service that the new entrants will be bringing on board? Now, industries such as the soft drink industry that are characterized by firms with strong brands are difficult to break into without spending heavy on advertisements. In some cases, it is even very difficult for you to replicate these soft drink or beverages. For instance, Coca-Cola, they own the patents to their secret ingredient. And so you can stretch or try all you can, but you will never be able to replicate their products. And so when you have industries with such strong brands in terms of differentiating their product from the ones in the existing market, then it can serve as a barrier to new entrants. Now, capital requirements. The need to invest large amount of money to gain entrance to an industry is also another barrier to entry. In other words, when an industry is characterized by one's ability to survive depending on the amount of investment they make, then it can serve as a disincentive to new entrants simply because they will not be in the position to invest such huge of money. And don't forget, they must have borrowed it from potential financial and non-financial avenues just to supplement their day-to-day operations. And so they will not have that luxury of time to keep the money locked up for a very long period of time. Still on the barriers to entry, cost advantages independent of size can also be another barrier to entry. And when we talk about cost advantages independent of size, we are referring to the degree to which existing firms may have cost advantages not related to their size. This indicates that maybe the existing firm in an industry may have purchased their land or their property or their machinery when it was less expensive than it is today. So as new entrants are now trying to flood into the market, they will realize that to get the land or to get this particular machinery, it is too expensive or exorbitant. But for the already established or existing firm, it is something that they might have acquired at a previous date when it was not so much costly. So that can also be a barrier. Now, access to distribution channels. When distribution channels are often hard to crack, then it can be a barrier to new entrants because they will still be fidgeting and struggling to create their own or join the existing distribution channel. And this is particularly true in crowded markets such as convenience stores markets. Now, government and legal barriers. In some situations, too, the states can intervene to set up their own legal barriers so that it will be very difficult for new entrants to get into the market. And you can just cast your mind back to the recent cleanup exercise that was instituted by the Bank of Ghana, where the minimum capital requirement was increased to 400 million Ghana cedis. Okay, so as a way of cleaning up the financial industry, you realize that a lot of banks lost their certificate to practice, and others also had to amalgamate or join their forces before they could survive that exercise. So that is also a legal or a governmental way that barriers can be created to ward off new entrants. So beside the traditional ones that I've mentioned so far, the six, there are also non-traditional barriers to entry. And when we talk about non-traditional barriers, it is characterized as very difficult to start up. It's very much difficult for startups to execute barriers to entry that are expensive, such as economic of scale, because money is usually tight. So if you are a startup and you've identified a lacuna in the market and you want to carve a niche for yourself over there, it will be very difficult for you to use barriers like economic of scale because you will still be struggling to even perhaps break even. So what are some non-traditional ways that you can use? And we are saying that startups have to rely on non-traditional barriers to discourage new entrants so that they can also earn a lot of profits for identifying and moving into that market. And some of these include assembling a world-class management team. That would be very difficult for other companies to replicate. And this is what we call in HR as having people with distinctive capabilities. Distinctive capabilities. So, yes, I've explained the strength of the management team, where we are saying that if startup put together world-class management team or people with distinctive capabilities, it may give the potential rivals pause in taking on the startup in the chosen industry because it will be very difficult for them to replicate this sort of managerial team or have them at their disposal. Then another non-traditional barrier that can also be used is what we call first mover advantage. First mover advantage. And the basic tenets of first mover advantage is that if a startup business pioneer, or a startup pioneer, if a startup pioneers an industry or a new concept within an industry, the name recognition the startup establishes may create a barrier of entry. So as we speak now, if you are able to identify a need or a gap in the market, and you move in there to carve a niche for yourself, then whilst people are fascinated about this new industry that we have now created, it will be very difficult for them to come in there because the name that you are using also connotes a lot of authority and dominance in the vacuum that you are occupying at the moment. So being the first mover always kind of disincentivize others to also enter because they will be struggling to figure out a way that they can use to outsmart you. And by the time they get to they even enter, you might have also gone very far. Now, another non-traditional barrier to entry is what we call passion of the management team and employees. And research indicates that if the employees and the management of a startup are motivated by unique culture of the startup, which means they really enjoy working under the organizational culture, and they also anticipate a large financial reward, then this combination can be very much difficult for other firms, perhaps larger ones, to even replicate. So once you are able to create an organizational culture which the management team and employees really enjoy working within, and you are also in a good position to incentivize them to contribute their all, then you will be in a position to stand any competition that you face. Still on the non-traditional barrier, the uniqueness of one's business model can be construed as a barrier to entry in the sense that if a startup is able to construct a unique business model and establish a network of relationships that makes the business model work, then this sets as an advantage of creating a barrier to entry because it will be very difficult for potential new entrants to achieve all these hurdles within the shortest possible time. Again, the internet domain name that a particular startup adopts can also be a good barrier to entry in the sense that some internet domain names are so spot on that they give startup a meaningful leg up in terms of the e-commerce opportunities. So currently in Ghana, Jumia is facing this sort of competition from other e-commerce channels like Get for Less and Superprice. So previously, we all knew Jumia to be the go-to place when it comes to e-commerce, irrespective of the goods or services that you are requiring. But as we speak now, some have emerged, and the name that the domain name they are using is so spot on. So for instance, Get for Less, which implies that you will get the same item or product, but for a lesser price. And that's the name, Get for Less. And we also have Superprice. So you can check all of them out and see how they are doing in terms of their competition with Jumia. Now, inventing a new approach to an industry can also be a barrier to entry in the sense that if a startup invents a new approach to an industry and it executes it in an exemplary fashion, these factors create a barrier to entry for potential imitators. So what we are trying to say here is that if you are able to, first of all, do an industry analysis, then you identify potential factors that you can put together to make your approach in terms of your goods and services very much exemplary in terms of function. Then once you are through with it, you will have access to this particular knowledge, and it will be very difficult for your competitors who perhaps are new entrants or currently existing to imitate you, because they will not be possessing this unique knowledge you acquired through your market business analysis. Industry analysis. Good. Now, the third factor or the third force identified by Michael Porter is what we call rivalry among existing firms. Now, in most industries, the major determinant of industry profitability is the level of competition existing among the firms. So if the nature of competition is such that it is cutting through, then at the end of the day, whether some industries are folding up because they are struggling to even break even, other industries or giants or players in the industry will be making supernormal profit. So some industries are characterized as fiercely competitive to the point where prices are pushed below the level of cost and industry-wide losses occur. And when this occurs, it's able to flush out the weak players in the industry so that the dominant ones will now capitalize and control the entire market. In other industries too, competition is much less intense and price competition is subdued. So depending on the type of industry you find yourself, the determinant of your profitability will depend on some of these factors. Now, so what factors determine the intensity of rivalry among existing firms in an industry? Still on the outcome of research indicates that when the number and balance of competitors in an industry, so when the number and balance of competitors in an industry is high, then it can be a determinant of the intensity of the rivalry. And when we talk about the number and balance of competitors, we are referring to whether the more competitors there are, the more likely that one or more will try to gain customer by cutting its price. So is it the case that the more competitors you have, then the more price concessioning will be taking place, or what? All these will determine the intensity of the rivalry. Then also the degree of difference between products can also be an avenue of determining the intensity of the rivalry, in the sense that the degree to which products differ from one product to another affects industry rivalry, so that if the products that the industry players are bringing on board are highly differentiated, then there will be no need for us to compete, because at the end of the day, we all add different values to our products. However, if the products are very much similar, then the rivalry will be very, very high in terms of because the differences between the products are close. Now, still on the factors determining the intensity of the rivalry, we can also think about the growth rates of an industry. So in an industry where the competition among firms is slow growth. Okay, let me take it again. When the competition among firms in a slow growth industry is stronger than among those in fast growth industries, then intensity of the rivalry will be high. In other words, when there is higher level of competition among firms, but the growth in that particular industry is slow, and it's also characterized to be stronger than among those in fast growth industries, then there is higher likelihood of intensity of the rivalry. Now, the level of fixed costs. Ideally, firms that have high fixed costs must sell higher volumes of their products in order to reach break-even, or even to make some amount of profits. And this is the situation when compared with firms with lower fixed costs, because if the higher your fixed costs, it is expected that you have to sell more so that you'll be able to generate some revenue to cater for it, as opposed to someone whose fixed cost is a peanut or very, very meager, who can just sell few articles and generate a lot of revenue in return. So all these can also determine the intensity of the rivalry. Now, the fourth competitive force, which we are going to look at, is the bargaining power of suppliers. The suppliers that provide services to the industry players. What sort of power do they command in the industry? That is what we are going to look at. Now, suppliers can suppress the profitability of an industry to which they sell by raising prices or reducing the quality of the components they provide. Now, we are saying that suppliers can also affect the level of profit you achieve in a particular industry or in a market in two ways. The first avenue where they can use to suppress your profit is when they decide to raise the prices of the goods and services they sell to you, so that it will also affect your the profit that you are trying to save. So you have to plow back and then add up into your new cost price that you are going to, the new amount that you are going to use to purchase the goods or services. And they can also reduce the quality of the components they provide, so that it will be giving you a lot of bad feedback and challenges, or you will have to put a lot of these components together before you can get the previous desired satisfaction. Now, if a supplier reduces the quality of the components that it supplies, the quality of the finished product will suffer, and the manufacturer will eventually have to lower the price, because you can't be selling a substandard product for a higher price. Other than that, you will be driving off your customers. In the same vein, if the suppliers are powerful relative to the firm in the industry to which they sell, the industry profitability can also suffer. So we are basically trying to say here that if you are dealing with suppliers that have a lot of power in terms of fluctuating the prices of their the products they are selling to you, or modifying the quality of the products that they are bringing to you, then it has the potential to also affect you by suppressing your profitability. Now, there are a number of factors that have been identified to impact on the ability of suppliers to exert pressure on buyers. So what we are saying is that these factors may either increase or decrease the amount of power that suppliers command. And it is expected that we should be able to manage these factors as potential entrepreneurs, so that at the end of the day, our profitability will not be suppressed. So what are these factors? Supplier concentration. So when you find yourself in an industry where there's high level of supplier concentration, or when there are only a few suppliers in a particular industry, they all have their implications. So in the first scenario, where there are only few suppliers that supply a critical product to a large number of buyers, the suppliers have an advantage because over here, the demand for their goods and services is high, but the supply is inadequate. And for that matter, they can decide to even increase the quality, increase the price, or maybe reduce the quality, but sell it at the same price. And you will have no option than to go for it because we have very limited people playing the role of the suppliers. Conversely, in a situation where you have a lot of suppliers that are supplying a critical product to few number of buyers, then the supplier is disadvantaged. In other words, if they don't reduce their price well, or they don't price their goods and services well, or if they don't provide the right quality, then buyers will switch quickly to the other existing suppliers, which are in abundance. So that is it. Now, switching costs. Switching costs are primarily fixed costs that a buyer encounter when switching or changing from one supplier to another. So if as a buyer, I want to switch from my previous supplier to another supplier, and the cost is very, very high, then the buyer, as a buyer, I will be disadvantaged or I'll have less incentive to switch because I will not be willing to cater for the higher costs involved in switching. So that is how it can also impact on the power of supplies. Now, attractiveness of substitutes have also been identified as a way of ascertaining the bargaining power of suppliers. So when supplier power is enhanced, what does it mean? Supplier power is enhanced if there are no attractive substitutes for the product or services that the supplier offers. And so what we are saying is that if a supplier finds themselves in a situation where the products or services that they are churning out have no substitutes, then we can say that their power is enhanced. In other words, they have a lot of power in this regard, since they have few or no they have no attractive substitutes that will be competing with them. Now, the threat of forward integration. The power of a supplier is also enhanced if there are credible possibility that the supplier might enter the buyer industry. Okay, let me take it once again. The power of the supplier is enhanced if there are credible possibility that the supplier might enter the buyer industry, which means that if the supplier has the potential of setting up their own industry or transitioning from being a supplier and directly dealing with the customers, which are the main buyers of the industry players, then it means that they possess a lot of power because in this scenario, with any little agitation from the industry players may force the suppliers to now set up their own facility and be churning out the goods and services directly to the buyers. So that is why we are saying that the power of a supplier is enhanced if there is credible possibility that the supplier might enter the buyer's industry. So for instance, if previously Samsung was very much notable for producing cell phones and TV, right? And they had also specialized in supplying screens for laptop producers such as HP, Dell, the then Packard Bell, and so on and so forth. So Samsung was their main supplier when it comes to the procurement of the screens for the laptop. But it got to a point where Samsung felt that they were not, the screens that they were selling to these other industry players like HP, Dell, and so on and so forth, they were not actually getting the value for the quality that they were providing. And so they also started developing their own laptops. And that sent a strong signal. So that is a way we can construe that Samsung in this regard had a lot of power. They commanded a lot of power because they had the potential or possibility to enter into the buyer's industry, that is in the computer manufacturing industry. Now, bargaining power of buyers. So this is also another force as far as the competing framework or Porter's five forces is concerned. Buyers can suppress the profitability of the industry from which they purchase by demanding price concessions or increasing their quality. In other words, buyers have two main avenues that they can use to suppress the profitability of a particular industry. They can do this by asking for the price of goods and services to be reduced. Alternatively, they can also do this by asking for the products that are being sold in the market to be increased. So a typical example is the automobile industry, which is highly dominated by a handful of large companies that buy products from thousands of suppliers in different industries. Now, because of this situation, it allows the automakers to suppress the profitability of the industry from which they buy by demanding price reductions. Okay. Now, so what are the factors that have been identified to impact on the ability of buyers to exert pressure on suppliers? The first factor is what we call buyer group concentration. And if there are only few large buyers and they buy from a large number of suppliers, they can suppress the suppliers to lower costs and thus affect profitability of the industry from which they buy. So over here, we are talking about having few large buyers and they are also buying from large number of suppliers. Because of their meager or few nature, they can put a lot of pressure on the supplier because in this scenario, the suppliers now have few customers to churn out their goods and services to. So because the suppliers will be competing with each other, anytime the buyers ask for price concessions, they will be willing to follow. Otherwise, their supplies will go to waste. Now, buyers' costs. Research also indicates that the greater the importance of an item is to a buyer, the more sensitive the buyer will be to the price it pays. So if I attach a lot of importance to an item or a product that I'm buying, then I'll be very much sensitive to the price that is attached to it, such that if the price even goes up, because of the importance, I will still be willing to pay for it. And this is the strategy that most industry players use when they realize that the buyers have become addicted to their products. Okay. Degree of standardization of suppliers' products. Now, research also indicates that the degree to which a supplier's products differs from its competitors affects the buyer's bargaining power to the extent that if, as a buyer, I come into the market and I compare the standard or the qualities of the goods and services which are available, and I realize that there is this particular one which stands out because of its level of sophistication and quality, I will still be willing to pay for it because at that point in time, I know I am having value for money. Then also you can think about threats of backward integration, so which is the opposite of the forward integration. Now, the power of buyers is enhanced if there is a credible threat that the buyer might enter the supplier industry. So here we are thinking about a scenario where the buyer at a point in time may metamorphose to become a supplier. Now, if this is the situation, then we can see that the buyer has a lot of power, or they command a lot of power. And this can be a situation where perhaps an insurance company is not treating its customers well. So the insurance company is charging, for instance, huge insurance claims. Sorry, it's charging huge insurance fees from potential drivers and other road users. Now, the drivers can come together and create their own cooperative where they will develop a fund management system, and through this they can be using it as a way of insuring each other. And that was the genesis of Best Insurance Company. Best Insurance Company. At a point in time when the National Insurance Commission was exorbitantly increasing the insurance policy, the fee for it. I think they increased it for almost about 200%. So Best Insurance Company came in as a way of charging a premium which is quite lesser than the one the remaining insurance companies were charging. But as we speak now, I can't say if they are still operating in that regard. Now, let's look at some application of the five forces model, or Porter's five forces. So the first application, the model can be applied or used to assess, one, the attractiveness of an industry by determining the level of threats the industry possesses, and also the level of profitability that one stands to achieve for entering into such an industry. Basically, if a firm fills out a form, which I will be projecting to you shortly, and several of the threats to the industry profitability are high, the firm may want to reconsider entering the industry or think carefully about the position it will occupy. So this is the form I am talking about. Assuming as a firm, you want to, as a new entrant or as an entrepreneur, you want to assess the attractiveness of a particular industry you want to enter into and carve a niche for yourself, perhaps. Using this five forces model by Porter, you can quickly scan around and assess how attractive the industry is in terms of the profitability success stories over there. So by identifying the industry, you are supposed to ascertain these five parameters in terms of threat of substitutes, whether it is low, medium, or high, threat of new entrants, rivalry among existing firms, bargaining power of suppliers, and bargaining power of buyers. So basically, we are talking about the five forces over here. And to what extent are these five forces low, medium, or high, as far as it being a threat to the industry profitability is concerned? So assuming you are scoring low by 1, medium by 2, and high by 5, the moment you score 5, sorry, 1, 2, 3, the moment you score 3 truths, it means 3 times 5, which is 15, is too high. And it means there is a need for you to reconsider your venture into that particular industry. However, if you score 1 throughout, so 1 times 3 is 15, 3, 5, 15, which means it is quite realistic for you to venture into that particular industry. So this is how competing the five forces model of Porter can be used to assess the attractiveness of an industry based on the score that you get over here. The second application of the five forces model by Porter is that a new firm can apply the model to help determine whether it should enter an industry by using the answers that they get to several questions. And the questions are shown in the next slide. So basically, this series of questions help you to know whether it is rational or profitable to enter into the business. Now, so what are the series of questions that will guide you on whether you should venture into the business or not? The first question that you have to pose and ask yourself is that, is the industry a realistic place for a new venture? As a new entrant, is it more lucrative or realistic for you? If the answer is no, then quickly you need to reconsider the new venture or the industry that you are trying to go into. However, if the answer is yes, then there are other further questions that you also need to address, which are 3 over here, the 3 in green color. So the subsequent question to ask is that, are there areas in which we can avoid or diminish the factors that suppress the industry profitability? So some of the factors that suppress industry profitability are basically the 5 competing forces that we've spoken about. If there are threat of new entrants, the competition is high, suppliers have a lot of power, or buyers have a lot of power. Now, if your answer to this is yes, there is also the need for you to ask another further question, which is there a unique position in the industry that avoids or diminish the factors that suppress the industry profitability? So is there a vacuum in the industry where when you enter, the 5 competing forces will not be a threat to you? If the answer is yes, then it means you are still on track. Then the last question that you need to further ask is that, is there a superior business model that industry incumbents would find hard to duplicate? So here we are referring to an industry model which can help you to enjoy competitive advantage and, if possible, sustainable competitive advantage. And some of the elements that can help you to develop such a model include having distinctive capabilities in terms of both human resources and technology. And so once your answers to all these 3 questions in green color is yes, then it is a sign or a positive response for you to start the new venture. In other words, a positive response to these 3 questions or to any of these questions increases the likelihood of the new venture's success. However, if the answers to these questions are no, or a negative response to all 3 questions indicates that there is a need for you to go back to the drawing table, reconsider your business idea so that you will fine-tune it to make it more viable. Now, let's quickly switch on to competitor analysis. So far, we've been talking about industry analysis and how you can in-depthly analyze the industry that you intend to enter into in order to understand the ins and outs of the industry. We are now moving on to competitor analysis, where the focus now will be the other competitors or rivals that you are likely to be competing with. So a competitor analysis is a detailed analysis of a firm's competition. And we say it is a detailed analysis because the sophistication in your analysis must be rich in detail so that you be in the known about all the ins and outs of your competitors as much as possible. Now, competitor analysis have been identified to be very much important because it helps a firm to understand the position of its major competitors or rivals and the opportunities that are available. So as a firm, when you do a competitor analysis, it helps you to know your strengths, your weaknesses, and the opportunities that are out there, and the threats that you are also likely to face from your competitors. So a competitive analysis grid, which usually tries to visually present the outcome of competitor analysis, is a tool for recognizing the information a firm collects about its competitors. Now, there are several types of competitors. That's usually new entrants face. We have the direct competitors, the indirect competitors, and the future competitors. So whereas the direct competitors are businesses that are offering identical or similar products like the one you, the new entrant, also intends to do, the indirect competitors are usually businesses that are offering close substitutes or products from what you are also trying to produce as far as a new venture is concerned. And finally, the future competitors are the ones that are currently not existing. They are businesses that are not yet direct or indirect competitors, but could be at any time. So these are potential competitors who are currently pursuing something else, but with time, unless events point to the contrary, they are also likely to venture into your line of business, especially when the business trend starts to give signal that a lot of people are making supernormal profits in that line of business. Now, sources of competitive intelligence. So where do new entrants, as a way of understanding the competitive nature of their rivals, gather intelligence or information? To complete a competitive analysis grid, a firm must first understand the strategies and behavior of its competitors. In other words, a firm must be able to understand why the competitors are using specific strategies at some point in time and why they continue to do so over time. And by understanding the psychology behind this, it will also empower the new entrant or the entrepreneur to also use alternative strategies that can give them a competitive advantage or edge. The information that is gathered by a firm to learn about its competitors is referred to as competitive intelligence. So it's basically information about your competitors. A new venture should take care of its as it collects competitive intelligence in a professional and ethical manner, because once you violate the rules of the game, you can be sued and it can actually affect your operations. So what are some of the ethical ways to obtain information about competitors. There are so many potential avenues that new entrants or new ventures can potentially acquire information of their competitors. And they can do so by attending conferences and trade shows where their competitors will be present and representing their ideas. They can also purchase competitors' products so that they peruse it. They can also study competitors' website by always surfing on it. So you'll be like a wall gecko moving from one side of one competitor side to the other to always see what's new they are trying to bring. And the moment you start seeing the newness in their operation, you also have to think alike and then speed up your game. You can also set a Google email alerts on your competitors so that anytime something about them pops up on the internet, it will be sent to you directly. Or anytime an information about them crops up, it will be sent to you. So it's more or less like monitoring them electronically. Again, you can also read industry-related books, magazines, and journals, and usually annual reports of these competitors are equipped with a lot of proficient information. You can also talk to customers about what motivates them to buy your product as opposed to your competitors' product, so that by understanding the behavior of your customers, you can always present moving targets to them to satisfy their needs, tastes, and preferences. Now, competitive analysis as a tool for organizing information for a firm will assist them to collect wealth of information about its competitors. So what we are saying is that a competitive analysis grid is basically a tool that helps a firm to organize information it collects from its competitors. And as a tool, competitive analysis grid can also help a firm to see how it stack up against its competitors and provide ideas for markets to pursue and identify its primary source of competitive advantage. So if you are a company and you want to see how your competitors are also doing you according to some specific indicators or factors in the market, then you can put your venture side by side with them and compare it across with these competitors or rival to see where you think you have strengths and where you think you have weaknesses, so that you can quickly work on your weaknesses whilst you are also hammering and deepening your strengths. So this is a typical example of a competitive analysis grid for Greenvelope. So Greenvelope is the company or the venture, and it is trying to find its competitive strengths or weaknesses by comparing these variables or factors with how it emanates in other competing organizations like Evite, Paperless Post, Minted, and local traditional stationery. Sorry, local stationers or traditional stores. So in terms of the cost of the products, Greenvelope observed that it was operating at an even pace with paperless, but it had an advantage over Evite, even though Evite was also an electronic-based firm, and it was disadvantaged against the minted and local stationery shops, perhaps because they were doing it traditional, and so they were able to directly interact and intercommunicate with their customers. In terms of the selection tool, they were even with Evite, even with paperless, even with minted, but disadvantaged In terms of their turnaround time means when, for instance, customers order for your good or service or your product online, how long does it take for you to send it from the warehouse to their final destination? That is at the doorstep of the customer. So that is a turnaround time. And with turnaround time, they realized that they were, even with Evites, even with paperless posts, they were disadvantaged with traditional, and they also, minted, and they also disadvantaged with the local stationery, which means that they were taking a lot of time to send their ordered products. Or when people order for an item from their warehouse, it takes a lot of time for it to get to them as compared to the traditional one. So the traditional one might mean that the person is presently at the shop of Minted or the local stationery, and immediately they pay for the envelope, it gets delivered to them. So, which is an area they will need to work on in terms of their turnaround time. The same can be said about their social consciousness. They have an advantage, whereas these people have disadvantage, and so on and so forth. All right. So that will be all for today. Please go over the slides again, watch the video, and I will entreat you to make your own notes, because sometimes when you read through for the first time, it might sound very much simple, but the nature of the content is such that you'll be expected to understand it in rich detail, so that when you are given a case study or a question to do on your own, you'll be in a good position to do it. I'll also entreat you all to be preparing towards the next assignment, which I said I'll be giving you very soon. So you'll hear from me in the course of the week. Okay, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.